Hi, Dr. Carrier. I did my science project on an article I found in Science Illustrated called Animals Have a Favorite Hand. I found this article really interesting because I'm a part of the small population that is actually left-handed. The article stated that 90% of humans are right-handed while the other 10% are left-handed or ambidextrous. So I am a part of that small population, and I just thought it was really interesting to learn about animals and their relations to humans in the sense that, a very small percentage of them are left-handed as well, or prefer their left hand. And the gist of this article basically was, for decades, scientists have believed that humans were the only species with asymmetrical brains. Research has been done that has proved that a long list of animals actually prefer one hand over the other. And that's created the idea within these scientists that humans aren't the only ones with asymmetrical brains. Animals also show the splitting of functions between the two hemispheres of the brain, which we all know are the right and the left. And more into this, the left hand is controlled by the right cerebral hemisphere of the brain, and the right hand is controlled by the left cerebral hemisphere, meaning that the nerve processes that our brain goes through and does are inverted. So when performing specific tasks, animals prefer to do them with one side of their bodies. And this was shown in the 1970s when a man named Leslie Rogers did an experiment. He injected chicks with a certain chemical into the left side of their brain, and they noticed that it made the chicks, they could not distinguish whether it was a grain or a pebble that were placed on the ground in front of them. But when this exact same chemical was injected into the right side of the chick's brain, they weren't affected whatsoever and could still recognize whether or not what was placed in front of them was a grain or a pebble. There's several examples of animals who are partial to a certain side. Gorillas and chimps use their left hands to hold things and their right hands to perform fine motor skills, so there's that definition there in terms of primates. Walruses use their right flipper to wipe away dirt from their food they're looking for on the seafloor, and humpback whales find food by using the right side of their body to scrape food up from the seafloor. And in an experiment done, 60 out of 75 whales studied only have wear marks on their right jaw, while the other 15 had marks only on the left side of their jaw. So it shows that more of the humpback whales are actually partial to their right side as well. More into the functions of the left hemisphere and right hemisphere. The left hemisphere deals a lot with welcoming behaviors. They saw examples of this when dogs wag their tail more to the right. It's because they're seeing unfamiliar, unknown dogs who may be more dominant than they are. But when they wag their tails to the left, it's when they see their owner, which could be a more loving and a more calming relationship. The left hemisphere is also dominant in terms of like routine tasks, eating and the things we do every day, and even in terms of animals as well, what they do and eat every day. The right hemisphere is a little bit of a different story in terms of fight or flight responses. The right hemisphere deals with the flight responses. Animals exhibit a strong reaction when they see a predator coming from their left side, and they're less likely to react to a predator if it attacks from the right side. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Fear responses are also located in the right hemisphere. Even right-handed humans, when we're attacked, we react faster with the left side because it's more directly connected with our right hemisphere. So, like I said, the right hemisphere is aggression and, even sudden unexpected changes in the surrounding area and danger. The right hemisphere deals a lot with that in humans and in animals. And something that kind of triggered this for me in the article, it said that if you're a left-handed person, you would be at an advantage during a boxing match because, that right hemisphere controls your left hand, is the more aggressive one and the faster to react. So I thought that was interesting and a helpful way to remember that. Another part of the article talked about, if there were injuries to the right or left side of the hemisphere. Injuries to the left hemisphere affected seeing images and observed details in pictures, while injuries to the right hemisphere affected a person's general view. And this was represented in an experiment where patients were asked to reproduce a drawing of an H, and these were patients, I might add, that were injured on either their right or left hemisphere of their brains. They were asked to reproduce a picture of an H, and this H was made up of smaller letter A's. And so the patients who were injured on their left hemisphere typically drew an H but neglected to draw it made up of any A's, and the patients who were right hemisphere injured tended to draw A's all over their paper. So that was pretty odd, but it gave more in detail as to why, injuries to the left side and the right side of the brain obstruct images and the way we see things. And also it went into detail as to there were several theories as to why the brain is separated into hemispheres. I don't think, from what it said, that there's been a proven 100% correct conclusion as to why we, and even now some animals, are said to have two hemispheres. But it is a definite fact that they are inverted in their neural processing, and that, our right hemispheres do affect what the left side of our brains do, and what the left hemisphere does affects what the right parts of our body does. So, like I said, there hasn't been any proven facts as to why we have two parts of our brains. Another point in this article was that social animals prefer to use specific side of their bodies. This part of the article kind of floored me because I didn't think being social had any correlation as to what side you would be more partial to, but it said that gregarious animals generally have a much stronger side preference than non-social animals, because social animals must relate with other asymmetrical behavior in essence of their peers, and when they communicate and cooperate. An example of this that kind of made it make more sense to me was schools of fish. They said that fish that live alone do have a side preference, but it's not as strong as fish that are more social. And it said that all schools of fish actually have a side preference. They have one eye that goes towards the school and their other fish friends, I guess, and one side that actually goes out of the school of fish and to where prey could come and attack. And they said it varies from species of fish to species of fish, but that they all do have a preference as to what eye looks into the school and what eye looks outward. And then the last experiment that they talked about in here, well, there were two researchers. I have a hard time pronouncing his name. Valor Tiagara and Rogers, and they believe that humans' right-hand preference was actually strengthened as we started consuming food. And this doesn't necessarily mean the cavemen that picked up plants and nuts. It's when we started consuming food that demanded more intense processing and was more sophisticated. And also when we began to use language, that may have played a role because it required more sophisticated motor functions in the right hemisphere, and so thus a more asymmetrical brain. I never thought language could do that, but using those motor skills actually does play a huge role in the splitting functions of the brain. So we may not be as different from the animals as we think in terms of our brains and the way we react to things and do things. And then I had a few fun facts that the article mentioned about different animals and their ways of showing that they are partial to one side or another. I found that chimpanzees speak with their right hand, so when they're communicating and gesturing towards other chimps, they tend to use their right hand. I found also that cats prefer one paw when they're reaching for food, and this was shown when they're reaching, into a fish bowl and whatnot. What I mentioned before, fish turn one way when avoiding new and unknown objects. So, like I said, it depends on species to species, but they will turn one way to avoid predators. Toads actually eat with their left hands, but when they're in tadpole form, they turn right when they're moving towards the surface to get grasp for air. So it's just interesting that they're partial, but they're in the same species of animal. Lizards, they react aggressively when they're approached from the left side, so it said you could actually test this if you had a pet lizard. You could try coming up to it unexpectedly from both sides of its tank and seeing how it reacts. So that was pretty interesting. And then I also found that species of birds like pigeons and quails and chickens, they strike for their food on the right side. And that's been a research study that's been proven over and over again. And then since I did a video article, I obviously had to tell you about 5 applications. I think I found 5 or 6 to be quite honest. This was an article that was just completely full of them. I guess that's why it made it so interesting. Well, definitely psychology being one of them. The whole article referred to the brain, how it works, the hemispheres, the neural processing, and how they're inverted. So that's definitely something I know I've learned throughout my psychology classes. A new one that came up in there was epidemiology. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But I actually researched this and found that it was a branch of medicine that deals with the incidence and control of diseases. So this could do with, the chemicals that were injected into, the chicks' brains. And this could also go along the lines of chemistry and the diseases and stuff that happen when the left and right side of the hemispheres are injured. I obviously said biology, study of life, living things. This article is full of that. Zoology, the study of animals. This article talked about animals, all different types of vertebrates, humans, all of that. Also, evolutionary biology came up when it was discussing, how we may have began to know that we have split brain hemispheres, just kind of the evolution of a human brain, the evolution of an animal's brain. So evolutionary biology, excuse me, and then ecology, which is the study of relations between organisms. So when we're referring to the schools of fish and how they turn together, how chimps gesture towards one another, all of that. So that is 5 or 6 applications right there of how this article relates to science and science content. So I hope you enjoyed my video presentation, and I look forward to seeing you in class. Thank you.